Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so glad you're here with us because over the next hour or so, you are going to learn exactly why pitching flawless, irrefutable logic to your biggest client is, well, it's probably the primary reason you keep losing the deal.
Yeah, it's a hard truth.
It really is. I mean, right now, you might be sitting on this like beautifully engineered slide deck, you know the one. The return on investment math is spotless.
Oh, the exhaustive market analysis.
Exactly. You point to the chart, and you assume the data just speaks for itself, but then the deal stalls.
You get completely ghosted.
Right. And you just sit there wondering why the client can't see the obvious. Well, the reason is actually pretty simple, and it has absolutely nothing to do with your spreadsheet.
Yeah, we're not about.
Because you are not pitching to a calculator. You are pitching to a biological organism, one that is deeply wired for survival.
And that biological organism is, it's constantly scanning the environment for threats. So when you walk into a boardroom or, you jump on a high-stakes Zoom call and you just start hammering someone with pure logic, their brain doesn't process that as a helpful solution.
What does it process it as?
It processes it as a literal attack.
Wow. Okay, so today, our mission is to completely dismantle that traditional approach to business negotiations. We're going to teach you phase one of foundational negotiation skills.
Specifically the mindset and the mechanics.
Right. We're pulling from behavioral economics, functional MRI neuroscience, and advanced corporate playbooks to show you how human biology actually dictates B2B sales and internal team dynamics.
It's basically the operating system beneath the business deal.
Exactly. But before we get into the weeds, let's set a strict rule of engagement for this deep dive. Everything we're talking about today is anchored exclusively in the corporate arena.
Yes, strictly business.
Right, so we are not talking about extreme life or death hostage scenarios or like arguing with your spouse. We are talking about the everyday realities you face.
The brutal client renewals, the internal team disputes over resource allocation.
Yeah, or, those procurement managers who suddenly demand a 30% discount out of nowhere. The boardroom is our laboratory today.
Which means we really have to fundamentally rethink what a negotiation actually is, because the myth we've all been fed.
Oh, by movies, hustle culture, all of it.
Yeah, all those outdated sales seminars, they tell us negotiation is about dominance.
Right, the aggressive jerk archetype.
Exactly. The stereotype is this loud, unyielding executive who walks into a room, slaps a folder on the table, and just beats the other side into submission with an avalanche of facts.
Extracting maximum value while yielding absolutely nothing.
Right. And it assumes the person sitting across the table from you is your adversary.
Like they're an obstacle you have to defeat. But if you view the counterpart as the adversary, you've already sabotaged the interaction, right?
100%. The core psychological framework of high-level business is that great negotiation is actually great collaboration.
Okay, wait. So if the person isn't the adversary, who is?
The adversary is the unsolved business problem sitting in the middle of the table. You and the counterpart are colleagues trying to solve that puzzle together.
You just happen to hold different pieces of it.
Exactly. If you don't internalize that collaborative baseline, any psychological tool you attempt to use later will just register as, well, cheap, sleazy manipulation.
And the counterpart will feel it, right?
Yeah.
They'll sense that you're trying to corner them rather than actually work with them.
Oh, absolutely. They have biological hardware designed to detect exactly that kind of pressure.
Right, which brings us to the actual hardware running inside their head. To understand why logic fails, we have to look at the brain's alarm system, the amygdala.
Yes. This is where the biology really takes over. The amygdala is this little almond-shaped cluster deep inside the brain's temporal lobe. It's basically the command center for fear and emotion. And the most critical piece of data to understand about this structure is that roughly 75% of it is dedicated exclusively to negative survival-based processing.
Wait, 75%?
Yeah, 3/4 of our emotional processing center is actively looking for doom.
That is wild.
Well, we're evolutionary descendants of pessimists, right? Think about it. The ancient human who looked at a rustling bush and logically deduced, oh, it's probably just the wind.
They didn't survive when it turned out to be a tiger.
Exactly. They didn't pass on their genes. But the human who assumed the worst, whose amygdala flared with terror and forced them to run, they survived.
So we are literally hardwired to prioritize potential threats over potential gains.
We are.
But, I mean, in the modern business world, there are no tigers hiding in the boardroom. The stakes are like a software integration, or a Q3 marketing budget.
Right, but the amygdala doesn't know that. It doesn't distinguish between a physical threat to your life and a psychological threat to your autonomy, your status, or your resources.
Oh, that makes sense.
So when a seller pushes aggressively for a signature or demands a budget commitment or just invalidates a client's hesitation with a barrage of ROI statistics,
The client's amygdala registers a threat to their autonomy. It interprets the pressure as a predator.
it really does. And the biological response is immediate. It triggers what we call an amygdala hijack.
An amygdala hijack, what actually happens in the brain during that?
When the alarm sounds, the brain literally reallocates its resources. Blood flow, oxygen, and glucose are diverted away from the prefrontal cortex.
Which is the highly evolved, rational math-doing part of the brain.
Exactly. The resources leave that area and are sent to the primitive emotional centers to prepare for fight or flight.
Wow. So that completely explains the blank stares.
Yes.
If I'm a vendor pitching a complex, highly logical solution to a defensive client, their prefrontal cortex is basically starving for oxygen.
The cognitive capacity literally drops. They physically cannot process the logic of your pitch in that state.
You know what it's like? It's like trying to stream a massive, data-heavy 4K movie to a laptop, but the laptop's Wi-Fi receiver has been physically turned off.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy. Like, my end of the connection is flawless. My data, the slide deck, the return on investment, it's perfect. But it just bounces off a brick wall because their receiver is powered down.
The Wi-Fi analogy is incredibly accurate, but we actually have to take it a step further.
Okay, how so?
Because the amygdala doesn't just shut off the receiver. It acts as an active signal jammer.
It's jammer.
Yeah. During a hijack, the brain becomes hypervigilant. It's actively scanning your logical arguments to find flaws, discrepancies, or just any reason to reject you.
So the logic itself becomes the threat it's trying to neutralize.
Precisely.
Okay, so if pushing logic acts as a Wi-Fi jammer, what happens when we try to soften the blow? Because, a lot of modern business advice says, don't be aggressive, walk in and immediately offer a compromise, look for the win-win.
Oh, the classic win-win.
Yeah. If I start an alignment meeting by explicitly saying, hey, I'm sure we can find a win-win here, doesn't that disarm the amygdala?
Counterintuitively, no. Win-win is actually one of those destructive openings in the corporate vocabulary. Wait, really? Why? It sounds entirely collaborative.
It sounds collaborative to the speaker, but to the listener, it acts as a massive trigger.
How so?
When a vendor leads with win-win, the counterpart subconscious immediately translates that to, oh, this person is about to ask me for a significant concession, and they're going to try to dress it up as a mutual victory.
Oh, wow. It raises their guard instantly.
Exactly. It triggers their spidey sense that you're trying to pick their pocket.
I can actually recognize that feeling.
Yeah.
If someone says they want a win-win, I immediately start wondering what they're trying to take from me.
And beyond just the phrase itself, the entire concept of a compromised win-win violates the fundamental principles of behavioral economics.
Let's talk about Daniel Kahneman's prospect theory here, right? The Nobel Prize-winning work.
Yes. Kahneman gave us the concept of loss aversion.
Break down how loss aversion applies to a business compromise for us.
Well, Kahneman proved mathematically that the psychological pain of losing something is roughly twice as intense as the psychological joy of gaining the exact same thing.
So the bad feeling is double the good feeling.
Right. If you find $100 on the street, you feel a certain level of happiness. But if you lose $100 from your wallet, the frustration and anger you feel is twice as powerful as that happiness.
Okay, so if we apply that to a corporate budget negotiation, let's say we're arguing over a $20,000 difference in a contract,
Okay.
and we decide to just split it down the middle, a classic compromise. We both give up $10,000 to meet in the middle.
From a purely mathematical standpoint, sure, it looks fair.
Right.
But biologically, because of loss aversion, giving up that 50% feels to both sides like they lost 100%. Both parties walk away from the table feeling the disproportionate sting of the loss.
So neither side feels victorious. They both feel bruised.
They feel like they bled.
Wow. And what are the long-term consequences of a contract signed under those conditions?
Passive aggressiveness.
Oh, the worst kind.
The deal gets signed, sure, but the resentment lingers. When you move to the implementation phase, suddenly the client drags their feet.
They delay providing the necessary data.
Yeah, they start nickel and diming you on the scope of work. They become hypercritical of minor errors.
Because the relationship wasn't built on collaborative problem solving. It was built on mutual sacrifice.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've completely boxed ourselves in here. We can't push logic because it triggers the amygdala's Wi-Fi jammer.
Right.
And we can't push for a traditional win-win compromise because loss aversion ensures both sides feel defeated and the relationship deteriorates.
So we need a mechanism to bypass the amygdala entirely.
We need a way to turn the prefrontal cortex back on so the logic can actually land.
And the mechanism you were looking for is tactical empathy.
Tactical empathy.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a term that gets thrown around a lot in corporate circles, often incorrectly. We really need to be razor sharp on what tactical empathy actually entails.
Let's do it.
First, let's look at what it is not. It is absolutely not sympathy, right?
Correct. Sympathy is an emotional reaction. It implies you feel sorry for the other person. You do not have to feel pity for a demanding CEO or a rigid procurement manager.
Good, because I usually don't. And it's not agreement either. I don't have to yield my position or concede to their unreasonable demands just to show I understand them.
Exactly. Agreement is a logical concession. Sympathy is an emotional enmeshment. Tactical empathy is neither of those things.
So what is it?
It is a calculated cognitive process. It is the deliberate act of looking at the business problem entirely through their eyes, deducing the hidden systemic pressures they are facing, and then, crucially, strategically vocalizing that reality back to them.
Strategically vocalizing it. Okay, let's see how this operates in a real corporate environment. We'll examine a scenario we can call the frozen deal.
Oh, every salesperson's nightmare.
Truly. Okay, imagine a senior account executive at an enterprise software company. They are like days away from closing a multi-million-dollar logistics platform deal.
Hi, sis.
Very. They've run a 3-month pilot program. The data from the pilot is phenomenal. It proves the software will save the client over $100,000 a month in supply chain inefficiencies. Everything is aligned.
The logic is undeniable.
Exactly. But then, out of nowhere, the main champion at the client company, let's say it's the VP of operations, goes completely silent.
They ghost you.
They ghost the account executive for a full week. Finally, they send a single cryptic email that just says, management is reevaluating priorities. The logistics platform is on hold indefinitely.
The absolute worst.
Now, let's look at the traditional logical reaction, the old way.
Okay.
The account executive reads that email. Their own amygdala flares up because their massive commission is suddenly vanishing, and they go straight into fight or flight.
They panic.
Yep. They immediately call the VP and leave a frantic voicemail. I don't understand why we are delaying. The pilot proved we can save you $100,000 a month. Every month we wait, your company is burning money. Look at the ROI deck on page 4. It makes zero mathematical sense to freeze this.
Which is biologically the worst possible move.
Right.
The seller is attacking the VP's decision with pure logic, completely ignoring the fact that the decision to freeze the deal was almost certainly driven by fear.
So the seller's logic just feels like an assault.
It completely invalidates the VP's internal reality. It makes them defend their fear.
So let's apply tactical empathy instead. The new way.
Right. The seller needs to stop staring at their own spreadsheet and look at the ecosystem surrounding that VP of operations. Why would an intelligent executive suddenly freeze a project that clearly saves money?
The seller has to deduce the hidden pressures. Let's say there has been industry news about the client company facing a slight downturn.
Okay.
Or maybe they just brought in a notorious cost-cutting chief financial officer.
Oh, that changes the entire landscape.
It really does.
Because now the VP of operations isn't blind to the $100,000 in savings. They are terrified. They know that if they stick their neck out to approve a massive multi-million-dollar software implementation right as a ruthless new CFO takes over, they are putting a giant target on their back.
Because if the implementation hits even a minor snag, the VP could literally lose their job.
Exactly. Their biological drive for survival, keeping their status, their income, their job, is vastly overpowering the logical drive to optimize the supply chain.
So if the seller attacks the delay by quoting ROI, they are aiming at the wrong target. The price isn't the problem. The fear of the new CFO is the problem.
Precisely. You have to address the emotional reality, not the surface-level symptom.
Okay, but how do we do that mechanically? How do I actually phrase that realization to the VP without sounding like I'm, psychoanalyzing them?
You use a linguistic tool called an affect label.
An affect label. Let's unpack that.
To understand why labels work so well, we have to look at the functional MRI research conducted by Dr. Matthew Lieberman at UCLA.
Lieberman's studies on affect labeling are absolutely fascinating. Can you break down the exact setup of that experiment?
Sure, so he placed subjects inside an fMRI machine so he could monitor real-time blood flow and electrical activity in their brains.
Okay, they're in the tube.
Right, they're in the tube. He then showed them photographs of faces displaying intense negative emotions, anger, intense fear, aggression.
And what happened?
As expected, looking at those threatening faces caused the subject's amygdalas to immediately flood with activity. The alarm system was triggered.
So they were experiencing a manufactured amygdala hijack right there inside the scanner.
Yes, but then Lieberman introduced a tiny variable.
What did he do?
He asked the subjects to look at the angry faces and simply apply a word to the emotion they were seeing.
Apply a word.
Yeah, they just had to choose a label like angry or scared.
Wait, they didn't have to analyze why the person was angry? Or try to solve the anger?
Nope, they just had to name it.
And what did the fMRI show?
The results were staggering. The moment a subject applied a verbal label to the negative emotion, the BOL-D signal, that's the blood oxygen level dependence signal in the amygdala, measurably plummeted.
The electrical activity just dispersed.
It dispersed, and simultaneously a region called the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, which is associated with cognitive control and emotional regulation, lit up.
Wow. So by simply applying a word to the fear, they biologically hit the brakes on the alarm system.
The act of labeling forces the brain to use its higher-order processing centers. It pulls energy away from the primitive fear center and redirects it to the logical cortex. Words act as neurological switches.
That is incredible. We are literally hacking the Wi-Fi jammer.
We are.
So if we take Lieberman's neurobiology back to our frozen deal scenario, the seller gets the VP of operations on the phone. They don't mention the pilot data. They don't mention the lost savings. They use a label.
Right. And the standard formula for a label starts with phrases like, it seems like, or it sounds like.
Those framing words are incredibly important because they imply observation, not certainty. So the seller says, it seems like the recent shifts in the executive team have created a highly scrutinized environment, and there's a lot of internal hesitation to sign off on a massive implementation until the dust settles with the new CFO.
Listen to the architecture of that sentence. It identifies the fear, the scrutiny, the new CFO, the hesitation, without ever sounding accusatory.
It's critical to note the specific phrasing I avoided there, too.
What did you avoid?
I didn't say, I am hearing that you are scared of the new CFO, or I think you are under a lot of pressure. The distinction between it seems like and I am hearing feels minor, but it's actually a massive trap, isn't it?
Oh, the I trap. It absolutely destroys empathy.
How come?
The moment you insert the word I into a label, you shift the spotlight away from the counterpart's problem and onto your own ego.
I am sensing. What I'm hearing is, I think.
Exactly. It makes you the main character of the interaction.
It feels incredibly arrogant to the buyer. It feels like the seller is playing armchair psychologist, diagnosing them.
It triggers defensiveness. The counterpart feels observed and analyzed rather than understood. By removing the I and relying on neutral observation, it sounds like you position yourself as a mirror.
And a mirror doesn't judge. It just reflects what is there.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the beauty of a neutral mirror is that if your label is completely wrong, it doesn't damage the relationship.
Okay, let's play that out. If I say, it seems like there's hesitation because of the new CFO, and I'm entirely off base, what happens?
The counterpart won't be offended. Because you didn't accuse them, you just offered an observation. They will naturally correct you.
So they might say, oh no, the CFO actually loves the project. The hesitation is coming from the IT department. They just don't have the bandwidth for the integration this quarter.
Right. Which is incredibly valuable information.
I still win.
Yeah.
Because I just uncovered the real obstacle.
But if you had said, I think you're terrified of your new CFO, and you were wrong, you would have insulted them and shut down the communication completely.
So I delivered the neutral label. It seems like the recent shifts have created a lot of internal hesitation. What is the very next step? Do I immediately follow up by explaining how our software has flexible deployment options to ease the pressure?
No. If you do that, you destroy the effect of the label.
Really?
Yes. This is the hardest mechanical skill for corporate professionals to master. After you deliver an effect label, you must deploy dynamic silence.
Ah, the agonizing silence.
You shut your mouth entirely, you state the label, and you count to 4 in your head. 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's so hard to do.
You have to give their brain the physical time to process the words, for the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex to activate, and for the amygdala to power down.
It is deeply uncomfortable for anyone in sales or management to let dead air sit on a call. We are conditioned to believe that silence equals failure. If we aren't pitching, we're losing.
But the silence is the space where the biological shift happens. If you rush to fill the silence with a pitch, you step on your own label.
You show them that the empathy was just a gimmick to get back to selling.
Exactly. If you hold the silence, the counterpart will almost inevitably exhale and validate your observation.
They will say, yes, exactly. The new CFO is scrutinizing everything. I know your platform works, but I simply cannot risk a failed launch right now.
And boom! The Wi-Fi receiver is back online.
We are no longer arguing about the price of the software. We are collaborating on a political strategy to present the software to the CFO in a way that protects the VP's status.
You have officially shifted from adversaries to allies against the unsolved problem.
That is so powerful. Now, this brings us to a tactic that takes this concept of addressing negatives to its absolute extreme.
This one requires an immense amount of confidence to pull off.
It really does. The accusation audit.
It is an advanced application of the affect labeling neuroscience, and it is brutally effective when executed properly.
Let's define it. An accusation audit is the process of exhaustively cataloging and stating out loud every single terrible, unfair, or skeptical or negative thought the counterpart is harboring about you or your company.
And you vocalize it before they ever have the chance to say it.
You are systematically diffusing the bombs they brought into the room before the meeting even begins.
Exactly.
Let's contextualize this with a story. Imagine you run a boutique consulting firm that charges premium rates.
Very expensive.
Yes. And you are walking into a pitch with a massive, notoriously frugal corporation that usually relies on giant, cheap, volume-based agencies.
So they view you with intense skepticism from the moment you walk through the door.
Right. Now, the traditional approach is to walk in, project overwhelming confidence, pull up a deck full of glowing case studies, and aggressively try to prove your worth to overcome their skepticism.
Which just gives their amygdala more ammunition to reject you as arrogant and out of touch.
So instead, we open with an accusation audit. We sit down, leave the slide deck closed, and say, before we begin, you are probably looking at our proposal and thinking we are wildly overpriced. You probably think we are a boutique agency with a bloated sense of self-importance coming in here trying to maximize our profit margins at your expense.
Wow.
It probably seems like we have zero understanding of the strict budget constraints your division operates under. And you might be sitting there thinking this entire meeting is going to be a complete waste of your morning.
It feels incredibly dangerous to say those words.
It really does. If I'm a consultant, my immediate fear is that I am planting negative ideas in their head. What if they weren't thinking I was an arrogant, overpriced vendor? By saying it out loud, haven't I just convinced them that I am?
It is a very common fear, but it fundamentally misunderstands how human psychology processes negative information. Fear only grays in the dark.
Unpack that. What do you mean by growing in the dark?
Unspoken fears, suspicions, and resentments, they fester in the amygdala. If a client is harboring skepticism about your pricing, and if you are a premium vendor pitching a frugal company, they absolutely are ignoring that skepticism doesn't make it disappear.
It just acts as a constant background hum of interference, jamming every logical point you make.
Yes. The elephant in the room is trampling the presentation.
So by dragging those unspoken accusations out of the dark and into the bright light of the conversation, you strip them of their power.
Think about the biological reality of the client in that moment. They walked into that boardroom with their armor on. They had their mental list of objections ready. They are too expensive. They don't understand our culture. They're too small.
They were braced for a fight.
And suddenly you just read their entire list of objections out loud. You articulated their worst fears about you with complete calm.
You validated their skepticism so thoroughly that they no longer have to expend energy defending it.
The armor becomes useless.
It completely disrupts their expected script.
Mm-hmm.
They can't attack me with the overpriced argument because I just voluntarily surrendered it.
And human nature abhors a vacuum. When you launch a comprehensive accusation audit, the almost universal response is for the counterpart to reflexively defend you.
Wait, they defend me?
Yes, because you went so far into the negative, social dynamics force them to pull you back toward the center.
Oh, so they will wave their hands and say, whoa, hold on. We don't think you're a waste of time. We've seen your work. We know you deliver high quality. We're just trying to figure out how to justify the premium to our board.
The dynamic completely flips.
By embracing the absolute worst things they could think about me, I established absolute emotional safety. They realize I am not hiding anything. I am not trying to spin them.
You proved that you understand their perspective so deeply that you can articulate it better than they can. That is the pinnacle of tactical empathy.
Okay, so we have established the internal mindset collaboration over combat. We have explored the cognitive strategy of empathy using labels and accusation audits to quiet the amygdala.
But all of this relies on knowing what words to say.
Right. Which means we now have to transition to the most critical and often the most overlooked element of corporate communication, how you say the words.
The delivery. Because if you deploy a perfectly crafted tactical empathy label, but you say it with the wrong voice, the entire biological hack fails.
To understand the mechanics of delivery, we have to look at the work of Dr. Albert Mehrabian.
Yes, the psychology professor at UCLA who conducted groundbreaking research back in 1967.
Mehrabian's research gives us the 738-55 rule. He wanted to understand how humans decode communication when there is high tension or when someone is communicating feelings and attitudes.
And what he found is that the literal words we speak carry surprisingly little weight.
Right. According to his data, when evaluating the emotional intent behind a message, only 7% of the impact comes from the actual spoken words.
7%.
That is a terrifying statistic for anyone who spends 3 hours agonizing over the exact wording of a proposal or an email. 93% of the data being processed by the counterpart has nothing to do with your vocabulary.
38% of the impact comes from tonality, the pitch, the cadence, the inflection, the rhythm of your vocal cords.
And 55% comes from body language, posture, facial microexpressions, eye contact.
Now, obviously, this doesn't apply to every single interaction. If you ask a colleague, hey, what time is the marketing sync? The words carry the majority of the meaning.
Correct. Mehrabian's rule specifically applies when there is incongruence in the communication.
When the words are saying one thing, but the tone and the body language are projecting something else.
And in high-stakes corporate negotiations where trust is fragile and everyone is guarding their real bottom line, incongruence is everywhere.
When the words and the nonverbals contradict each other, the brain always defaults to the nonverbals. The 93% is the truth.
Let's visualize this. If you hand a revised contract to a vendor and they look at it, tighten their jaw, look down at the table, cross their arms, let out a sharp breath and say, yeah, these terms look fine.
The 7%, the words, these terms look fine, is a complete lie.
The 55% body language, the crossed arms, the tightened jaw, is screaming that they absolutely hate the terms.
And in the corporate arena, people lie constantly, not necessarily because they are malicious sociopaths, but out of self-preservation.
Right. A mid-level manager might lie about having the authority to sign a deal because they are embarrassed to admit they have to ask their boss.
A client might lie about their budget because they fear you will price gouge them if they reveal the true number.
They're just protecting their perceived status. And there is a specific behavioral tell that occurs when cognitive load increases due to deception. We call it the Pinocchio effect.
The Pinocchio effect is a fascinating physiological response. Maintaining a lie, or even just masking a deep uncertainty, requires a tremendous amount of cognitive processing power.
You have to keep your story straight, suppress your true feelings, and monitor the other person's reaction all at the exact same time.
The brain is working overtime.
Because the cognitive load is so high, the speaker often loses the ability to be concise. They overcompensate by using far too many words to answer a very simple question.
They build a fortress of word salad to hide the weakness in their position.
Okay, let's say I ask a client, do you have the internal budget approved for a Q3 launch? And the honest answer, no, but they don't want to admit it.
They won't just say no. They will say, well, the Q3 allocations are currently in a transitional phase as we integrate the new forecasting models from the regional directors. And while the core capital is theoretically earmarked, we're waiting on a final signature loop from the executive committee before we finalize the specific disbursement schedules.
That is a textbook Pinocchio effect. They used 50 words to say no.
When you hear that kind of sprawling, overly complex response, your 738-55 radar should be flashing red. You know there is a hidden obstacle they're desperately trying to talk around.
Reading their nonverbal cues is essential. But the true mastery of this phase of negotiation is actively weaponizing your own 38%.
It is learning to consciously control your tonality to physically alter the brain chemistry of the person listening to you.
We absolutely have to demonstrate this. We can't just talk about the theory of voice. We have to hear it.
Let's do it. There are 3 primary vocal archetypes in business.
Let's start with the baseline, the voice you should be using for the vast majority of your interactions.
The accommodating voice.
Okay, I'm going to switch into it right now. So the accommodating voice sounds exactly like this. My pitch is slightly higher. It's very upbeat. I am actually physically smiling while I'm speaking, and you can hear that smile in the audio. It sounds incredibly open, friendly, and deeply curious.
Notice how that voice feels. It feels completely non-threatening. It implies that you are happy to be there, that you are eager to collaborate.
And the biology behind why this works relies on mirror neurons, right?
Yes. Humans are deeply social creatures. Our brains contain networks of mirror neurons that involuntarily mimic the emotional state of the people we are interacting with.
It's an evolutionary mechanism for social cohesion.
Exactly. So when you use an accommodating, smiling voice, the mirror neurons in the counterpart's brain fire, and they involuntarily begin to experience a positive emotional shift.
Their brain physically mimics the warmth I am projecting.
Yes. And a brain in a positive state is measurably more efficient. It is roughly 31% more capable of complex problem solving than a brain in a neutral or negative state.
So by simply forcing myself to smile and speak with an upbeat cadence, I am literally expanding the client's cognitive bandwidth to figure out a deal with me.
You are priming their hardware for collaboration. That is your default setting. You use that 80% of the time.
But when pressure mounts, when a deadline is missed, or when a conflict arises, most untrained professionals reflexively abandon the accommodating voice and switch to the second archetype,
The absolute worst voice you can use.
the assertive voice.
Let's hear it.
Right, so the assertive voice sounds like this. It is rapid fire, the cadence is fast, and most noticeably, the pitch inflects upward at the end of the sentences. It sounds like I am driving a point home, but the upward inflection makes every statement sound like a defensive question. It feels very direct, but it's incredibly tense.
That voice is toxic to a negotiation. Listen to how abrasive it is.
It feels like a physical punch in the nose.
Because it is signaling dominance and insecurity simultaneously. The rapid pace shows anxiety. The upward inflection suggests you are demanding validation.
So when you hit a counterpart with the assertive voice, their amygdala flares instantly.
You have established yourself as a threat, and they will either fight back with their own assertive voice or they will retreat and shut down.
Which leads us to the ultimate tool. The third archetype. This is the voice you deploy when the environment is highly volatile, when a client is in full panic mode, or when you need to establish an immovable boundary without triggering a fight.
The late-night FM DJ voice.
Let me drop into it. This is the late-night FM DJ voice. The cadence slows way down. The pitch drops significantly from the accommodating voice. And the critical mechanism is that every phrase ends with a definitive downward inflection.
Hold that tone for a moment. Analyze the feeling of authority it projects. It is completely calm, yet entirely unyielding.
It feels like there is no room for argument, but it doesn't feel aggressive. What is the biology behind this specific downward pitch?
It stimulates the vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve.
Exactly. It is a massive nerve network that wanders from your brainstem down through your neck, across your vocal cords, and into your chest and abdomen, connecting to your heart and lungs.
Okay.
When you deliberately slow your speech and drop your pitch into a downward inflection, the physical vibration of your vocal cords actually stimulates the vagus nerve.
And what does that stimulation do to the body?
It triggers the parasympathetic nervous system. If the amygdala is the gas pedal for fight or flight, the parasympathetic nervous system is the biological brake pedal.
Oh, wow.
It releases neurotransmitters like acetylcholine, which physically lowers heart rate and reduces blood pressure.
So by speaking with a slow downward inflection, I am not just projecting calm. I am actively transmitting a biological signal that forces the listener's nervous system to decelerate.
You are managing their biology through the resonance of your voice.
Let's map this onto a high-stress corporate scenario. We'll call this the scope creep client. Imagine you are the director of a marketing agency. It is 4:30 p.m. on a Friday. You are packing up your laptop. Suddenly, your phone rings. It is your most demanding high-revenue client. They were in a total panic.
Their amygdala is fully hijacked.
Completely. They just found out they have to present to their board of directors on Monday morning, and they demand that your agency design 3 entirely new, complex slide decks over the weekend. For free.
Oh, brutal.
They're speaking 90 miles an hour, using that abrasive, assertive voice. We need these decks by Sunday night. You guys have to figure this out. This is a crisis.
Let's look at the traditional logical response.
The old way. I hear their panic, my own weekend is threatened, so my amygdala flares. I snap back using the exact same assertive, upward inflecting voice. We can't do that. That is completely out of scope. You didn't pay for emergency weekend deliverables, and my design team is already offline.
And the situation explodes. You met their panic with resistance and aggression. Their hijacked brain doesn't hear the logic of the contract. It just hears that you are abandoning them in a crisis.
They will escalate. We spend $250,000 a year with you. Do you want to lose this account?
It devolves into an ego battle. You probably end up forcing your team to work the weekend anyway just to save the revenue, but the relationship is permanently scarred.
So let's apply the late-night FM DJ voice, the new way.
Okay.
The client screams their demand for the weekend work. I take a breath. I do not mention the contract. I do not mention the scope of work. I drop the pitch. I slow the cadence. I apply the downward inflection.
Let's hear it.
I hear how critical this board meeting is for you on Monday. We simply cannot spin up 3 entirely new decks by Sunday night.
Notice the architecture of what just happened. You delivered an absolute immovable no. You didn't yield a single inch of ground. But because you delivered it with the downward inflection, you didn't trigger their threat response.
The boundary is an impenetrable brick wall, but the delivery is wrapped in velvet. The slow cadence forces their brain to mirror my pacing. The downward pitch stimulates their vagus nerve, cooling the panic.
They have to accept the reality that the decks aren't happening, but they don't feel attacked by your refusal.
It is the ultimate life hack for setting boundaries in a corporate environment. You establish supreme authority while maintaining absolute emotional safety.
Now, this all makes perfect sense when we are in a room together or on a phone call.
But we have to address the reality of modern business. So much of our interaction is digital. We are hybrid. We are remote. How does the 738-55 rule operate when we are navigating Zoom meetings and endless Slack channels?
Right. If 55% of impact is body language, aren't we severely handicapped on a video call?
We are. The medium inherently restricts the data transfer. On a video call, you are reduced to a 2-dimensional box. This means you have to consciously amplify the 55% that is visible.
How do I do that without looking theatrical?
First, adjust your framing. The default behavior is to sit hunched over a laptop so only your forehead and shoulders are visible. You are suffocating your body language.
Push the camera back.
Exactly. Expose your torso and your hands. When you speak, use slow, purposeful hand gestures within the frame. It provides the visual data the counterpart's brain is starving for.
What about eye contact? Because looking at their face on my screen means I'm looking down, away from the camera lens.
Which breaks the illusion of presence. When you are delivering a critical piece of tactical empathy or deploying the FM DJ voice, look directly into the camera lens. It simulates direct eye contact on their end, which builds trust.
And what happens when we strip away the video entirely? What happens when we are negotiating via email? There is no tonality, there is no body language.
We are operating exclusively on the 7% of pure text.
Written negotiation is a minefield. It is the most dangerous medium because of a psychological phenomenon called negative projection.
Negative projection.
In the absence of tone and body language, the human brain will automatically project an emotional state onto the text. And because of the amygdala's bias toward survival, that projection will almost always be negative.
So if I send a completely neutral factual email saying the revised pricing tier will be sent by Tuesday, and the client happens to be having a stressful day,
they will read your neutral text with an aggressive, demanding inner monologue.
They will project their anxiety onto my words. My brief email will be interpreted as dismissive or hostile.
How do we mitigate that? How do we hack biology over email?
You have to manually code the empathy into the text. You cannot rely on brevity. The biggest mistake professionals make in email is the lazy trap.
Oh, sending a massive multi-paragraph wall of text outlining 7 complex logical points, hoping to solve the entire deal in one message.
Yes. It completely overwhelms their cognitive load.
It does. You must chunk your communication. Send one specific point. Use an affect label right there in the text. It seems like the Tuesday deadline is creating some friction.
Ask one calibrated question and then stop. Allow the counterpart to process that single piece of data and reply.
You have to lead them on a step-by-step thinking journey rather than burying them in an avalanche of logic.
Exactly. Well, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. We have mapped the biological realities of the boardroom. Let's synthesize this into the core architecture of Phase 1 foundational negotiation.
The overriding thesis is this. You can memorize every advanced verbal tactic in the world, but if you attempt to deploy them without the proper biological foundation, they will fail entirely.
You cannot build a sophisticated strategy on a hijacked nervous system.
You must internalize the collaborative mindset. The adversary is the unsolved problem, never the person.
You must utilize tactical empathy effect labeling and accusation audits to proactively deactivate the counterpart's amygdala and bring their logical prefrontal cortex online.
And you must master the physical mechanics of delivery. Knowing when to hit the mirror neurons with the accommodating voice, and knowing exactly how to drop into the late-night FM DJ voice to stimulate the vagus nerve and project immovable authority.
Because without emotional safety, logic is completely useless.
Right. Now, information without application is just trivia. We want to give you a specific, actionable exercise to build this biological muscle memory. What is the assignment for the upcoming week?
Your assignment is entirely focused on tonality. For the next 7 days, I want you to spend exactly 15 minutes a day actively practicing the late-night FM DJ voice.
But the critical rule here is, do not test this on your biggest, most important client first.
Absolutely not. You do not practice a new swing during the Super Bowl. You practice in low-stakes, everyday environments.
Internal meetings, daily stand-ups.
Yes. Use the slow, downward inflection when giving a routine status update to your internal team. Use it when you are ordering a coffee at a busy cafe. Pay close attention to the biological reactions of the people around you.
Watch how their shoulders drop. Watch how the frantic energy in the room dissipates when you lower your pitch and slow your cadence.
You are calibrating the tool.
You are building the neurological pathways so that when you are sitting in a boardroom and a multi-million-dollar renewal suddenly starts going sideways, dropping into that vagus nerve-stimulating tone is an unconscious reflex.
15 minutes a day. That is the barrier to entry for mastery. And once you have your collaborative mindset locked in and your vocal delivery perfectly calibrated, you will be prepared for our next deep dive.
We will be moving into Phase 2 of our negotiation curriculum.
Phase 2 is where we transition from establishing safety to executing extraction. We are going to explore the specific, highly calibrated verbal tools like conversational mirroring and targeted interrogatives that allow you to extract deeply hidden deal-making information from a counterpart who is actively trying to conceal it from you.
It builds directly on the biological foundation we laid today.
Before we wrap up, we always like to leave you with a conceptual challenge, something to chew on that stretches the boundaries of the source material.
Consider the implications of everything we have unpacked today. We know that tactical empathy, effect labeling, and the FMDJ voice are incredibly powerful tools for bypassing a counterpart's biological defenses. But what happens when the ecosystem is perfectly matched?
What happens when both sides of the table are highly trained in these exact same psychological mechanics?
Imagine sitting down for a brutal contract renewal. You deploy a flawless accusation audit. But the procurement officer sitting across from you doesn't just relax, they immediately recognize the tactic.
They respond with a perfectly executed affect label. They drop their pitch into the FMDJ voice. They mirror your phrasing.
It's a fascinating scenario. Does the negotiation freeze? Does it create an endless, paralyzing loop where both sides are just endlessly, aggressively empathizing with each other without ever making a substantive move?
Or does something far more profound happen? When both parties speak the native language of human biology, does the ego finally evaporate completely?
Does the posturing disappear, allowing two highly efficient prefrontal cortexes to connect instantly, resulting in the most transparent, creative, and frictionless business collaboration possible?
We started this deep dive talking about the expectation of clean, undeniable logic, the spreadsheet mentality.
And we discovered that the reality of human interaction is vastly more complex and deeply biological.
But perhaps if we abandon the spreadsheet and learn to navigate the biology, we don't need the logic to be clean. We just need the connection to be real. Let that idea percolate as you practice your delivery this week.